Hello, everyone. It's Shane Conto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to Lost in the Wasteland, my weekly interview show where I learn a little bit more about somebody else's perspective on movies. But this is a special interview as I have filmmaker James Christy coming on to talk about his film Love and Communication. James, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I'll give you the floor for a bit to tell the audience a little about yourself and a little bit about your film.
Great. So yeah, I'm a playwright first. I've grew up in the theater. My father was a film director, was a theater director and professor at Villanova University outside of Philadelphia. So I grew up around play theaters. He threw us on stage at an early
Mm,
age. And writing plays became, part of my life. I was an actor for a little while as well. My wife and I have three kids. Our first kid was born, we were living in Jersey City, New Jersey, outside of New York City. And my son um, developed, walked and talked at around the right normal at times, but my wife thought there was something a little different about him. The doctor said, no, he's fine, no, he's fine. And then he actually started to lose speech around 2 years old.
mm.
And so not far after that, he was diagnosed with autism. And it was, this is a while ago now, it's almost 20 years ago. It was a time where diagnosis of autism wasn't as
Mhm.
much on the radar as it is now. It's a lot better now than it was then. And we had a really hard time. When once your kid is diagnosed, by the time they turn 3, your services really are dictated by your school system. And
Yeah.
we had a real, did not see eye to eye with our school system. They had a program they called an autism program, which we didn't think was good for our son. And so we really had to fight, which is still unfortunately a problem with a lot of parents, right? That you want to get a certain level of services for your child, and a lot of times that school system you're in says no, this is what you get,
Mm.
and so you have to really fight for yourself. And we had our time financially. Ended up we having lawyers, and we actually ended up giving up. And moving to another total, we had just bought a house and we had to leave this house, and it was really hard, but we got him in a good school. And for us, it was a long journey to do that. Along the way, we were looking for, as we were looking for the best kind of place to put him. I had found, you do a lot of research. This is all this stuff is really overwhelming. I found a school that was not too far away that was really highly regarded. The person who founded the school had written books and is a figure that was important, kind of famous in that field. I went to this open house and there were no openings in the school.
Yeah.
And it was just very notable. I decided to go anyway because I just wanted to learn about it and kind of see what it was like. And I got there and the parking lot was full, right? And I
Mhm.
get in there and the school was amazing, and they have a kind of a Q&A session. And some of the other parents, when they were asking questions, they were almost hostile. They were like people that were desperate. They're looking for a place for
Yeah.
their kid. And I'm like, there's no spaces. When is there going to be spaces? What's the what's the waiting list like? And I had this moment of realization, like, oh, I'm really now joining this community of people, parents who are just like broken, from this system. Is just so, and going through this. And so basically a few years after this all happened, I wrote a play about parents that were going through this. And in the play, it's really the parents, there's all these different types of approaches for kids with autism. And what we wanted to do was kind of more standard process called ABA therapy. It's a more standard scientific based process. But then there's
Mm.
also kind of more relationship based therapies. And we had explored some of those too. Well, in my play and in my film, the parents really have different ideas, right? The
Yeah.
father wants to really go hardcore on the ABA programs, and that science really, he becomes kind of fixated with this one solution and this one school in particular. And then the wife gets really into this relationship based therapy. It's based on an online program. We had been a part of something similar to this, and it's very expensive, and it's all digital. And in the play, and in the film, she gets very wrapped up and emotionally
Mm.
connected to the solution. And it really starts to represent something deeper about both of them, that they're both feeling isolated. They're both feeling a need for something. And yes, they really want to do their best for their child, but they're also really looking for something for themselves. And so that's the story I started to tell. And, biographically, a lot of it came from real life. We really did struggle with the school system. A lot of that stuff, to be honest, I think is unfortunately very resonates with a lot of people, not just parents with kids with autism, but all
Mm.
kinds of special needs. there is this awful thing where there's just a lack of funding. And so it becomes this really tricky process where the person on the other side of the table is, we can't give you what you want, you know. And some of those people on the other side of the table are good people, and
Yeah.
they want to help parents, and they're in a hard position because they have a budget that is very narrow. And so one of the things I did, it wasn't in the play, but was in the film, is the person on that other side of the table, the case manager. You know, the main couple's having a really, you know, difficult relationship with them. But it was important to me to see her side of the story, you know. And
Hmm.
in the film, she has a sister who's a single mom who also has a child with autism who's older. And this was really good for me because by the time I made the film, my own son was older, and so I was actually very
Yeah.
connected to that storyline. But also very connected, to be honest, about the fact that there's real not disparity. There's a real disparity in services, and it really does come down to your ability to kind of advocate for yourself, and finances are a part of that. And if you can hire a lawyer, you have a much better chance in your school system to essentially get the results that you want. Which is not fair, right? So there's a real
Yeah.
thing of fairness and what is right, and the level of a parents trying to advocate for their child. And in the end of the day, when you get what you want for your child, that might cost that school system X amount of money to pay for that school, you know, and what does that do to the rest of their school system, right? So this stuff is really complicated. And so, yeah, it's a long-winded answer. That's where it kind of came from, and
Hmm.
certainly very much grounded in things that happened to us, but also very much looking to be somewhat universal story, right, about
Yeah.
disconnection. And it's not just about autism; it is about people who are, you know, finding troubles of connecting with each other, you know, and looking for grasping at straws to find something, find more meaning that they're not getting from each other, you know.
Well, and I really appreciate you going in depth into the connection to your film, especially because you could tell obviously a lot of this was drawing from a lot of personal experience. And it
Yeah.
was very interesting when you had reached out to me because my wife's a BCBA and
Oh, okay.
works with uh kids with autism every day. And
Yeah.
she works with a lot of parents and
Yep.
they come from all different types of school districts and the challenge of, you know, especially because like I've lived in New Jersey my whole entire life, and there's a lot
Oh,
of
okay.
sides to New Jersey.
Yeah.
There's some school districts that are very affluent and have a lot of
Yep.
funding, and then there's the complete
Yep.
opposite. And
Yep.
I know my wife works where she works. There's some kids that it's like over an hour commute to school every day
Yep.
because
Yep.
it's worth getting that kind of care.
100%. Yep.
And so that was something that was very interesting to me watching this film. And obviously, this is a very personal expression for you. And a lot of the film does focus on the toll and the challenges of the parents, and then just dealing with that uphill battle in terms of funding and the programming and getting your child what they really need. How, what did you feel like was what did you feel like was the most important things that you wanted to get across in this film for viewers who might not know so much
Yeah.
about situations like this?
Yeah. So many things that come to mind. I mean, you know, when I wrote the play, you know, you don't come at these things with an agenda usually. I mean, some people I
Mm,
guess do, but you just start to tell a story, right? And that's
yep.
really the main thing for me, is I wanted to tell a good story, and that should be anybody, whether or not they are closely connected or they're not. You should be able to, something should resonate with you, right? And you want to make something that's universal. I think that one of the things, when I think about people who are separate from this world, right, who don't have a connection in, one of the things that I get kind of, I don't want to say frustrated by, but there is an element both in interpersonal things, moments, and also in, especially in media, when you see, and autism is more covered now than it certainly than it ever was,
Mhm.
where parents of kids with special needs sometimes get almost treated like heroes, like they're specific, they're like there's something special about them that
Mhm.
makes them uniquely suited to care for this special child. And that's like weirdly not offensive, but it's really, people, parents of kids with special needs, I think, get frustrated by that, right?
Mhm.
Because it's, no, there's nothing special about me. There's nothing I'm not better equipped. I didn't ask for this. I don't, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like this just came to us, right? And so this idea, when people will say a well-intentioned thing like, "Oh, you guys are amazing. I could never do what you could do." And it's like the answer is yes, you could if you because you
Yeah.
would have to because it's your child and you don't have a choice. And it's not like I'm special about. And so that kind of almost hero thing that you see sometimes in the media, it's I kind of want to break that down and just be like,
Mhm.
nah, we're just regular. If anything, we're more messed up. You know what I mean? We're spinning around in our heads about things, and so just that sort of approachability of just like people who are going through this, that I think it becomes a little bit of a missing in action, that they're going through something emotionally and they can feel kind of isolated by it. A story I say that's just separate from the film, but it goes to, I think, what the heart of that sort of isolation and that moment of those moments where you connect to people, right? So my middle son was in little league, a baseball player, and I was a baseball coach. And
Mhm.
my wife would go to the games, and watch her son, and she'd go with my oldest son. And my oldest son's not going to sit on the bench, right? He's going to
Yeah.
wander around. He wanders. That's what he does, right? And that's fine. And she can wander with him and watch the game a bit, but she's not sitting in the stands. And sitting in the
Mhm.
stands in a little league game, if you're, been in through these, a lot of the parents will go to the same games. You just build relationships with people and you
Yeah.
chat. So she's chatting with a friend and who's got a kid on the team, and they start talking about something, and then Jimmy just starts wandering off, and the person, just walked with my wife along with,
Yeah.
and a lot of times that the person's instinct is, oh, she has to go care for her son. Okay, I'll let them be. I don't want to get. And this person was like, nah, we'll just walk with you. And that always stays with me, right? Of that thing of like, I'm going to meet you where you are. I'm going to be like, this is your deal. So I still want to talk to you. I still want to interact with you. And we're now taking a walk. We're out in left field. And you know what I mean? So like
Mhm.
that is so important, right? And so I think that this, again, in the film, that's not like a specific, but what's underneath it is this idea that these are real people going through real
Yeah.
struggles and they feel isolated, and at those moments, and I think the the mother character in particular, you see how she's like really looking for connection. She's looking for
Mhm.
something, that someone to understand what she's going through that she's really not getting from her husband. And so yeah, I think that's a part of it, just understanding for people who are not going through it, just like, oh, they're just regular people, and they're going through something that's pretty intense sometimes, and they appreciate so much, just having a cup of coffee or having a drink or and talking about something that has nothing to do with autism.
Yeah.
One thing that'll happen also is like, oh, I thought of, a lot of times you'll hear from someone and it's an email or a text like, I saw this story about autism. Like, you should watch this movie about it's like, okay, but send me the comedy that has nothing to do with, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? This isn't the only like part of our brain. So anyway, yeah, that's something I
Well,
think about.
and I think your film really gets that across of these parents both have their challenges, they have their struggles, they have what they're trying to look for in life and have deficiencies in the relationship with each other.
Yeah,
And I think the film gets across very clearly that they're just people. And I
yeah,
appreciate your comment, especially of like, nobody like goes into this like, I'm gonna have a child with autism, I'm gonna do great with this. It's just like it happens
yeah,
to you. And
yeah,
you as a parent, it's like you're gonna figure things out. And you can definitely feel that figuring out and those
yeah,
challenges throughout this film, especially. And an earlier comment that you made, especially about the person on the other side of the table, and that was something I appreciated about the film, of that humanizing, because like
yeah,
that could just be seen as like, oh well, it's just an extra subplot, but I
yeah,
think it's important to show like, hey, that person that's on the other side, like on the other side of this system, is also a person too,
yeah,
stuck in a situation where it's just like they don't have a whole
yeah,
lot to be able to do with the funding that they have, and they're just trying to
yep,
do their best as
yep,
well. And
yep,
I think that's definitely a strength of the film for sure. Question I had, especially because obviously you mentioned you're primarily playwright. What were some of
yep,
the more technical ideas of like translating this? What were some of the things that you
yep,
discovered translating this into a film
yeah.
format?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, that storyline is one of the biggest, right? So, in the play, she's a character, and those scenes are, some of the more intense scenes both the play and the film are these scenes in these IEP meetings where they're
Yeah.
really struggling, and the father is really, kind of, yeah, he's going way beyond, right? But this is the conflict, and it does push parents. And I have seen
Mhm.
moments, and I've felt moments. I have never done anything to the degree of that father character, but I've
Yeah.
had that frustration. I've had feelings of frustration, and so what was important to me though was getting out of that room. And in general,
Mhm.
right, when any of the big challenge with any play, right, taking play into a film, and you'll see it if you've seen a lot of films, and probably you've
Yeah.
seen a fair amount of plays that turned into films. A lot of times you get the sense of stasis. A play is very verbal, right? It is very much
Mhm.
about, that is like you've got two people in a room, you got three or four people and five people. They're in a room, they're in a space. Those scenes typically are going to last for at least 5, but sometimes 15 minutes.
Mhm.
You just that's the world. And in a theater space, if it's a good play, you're engaged because you're right with them, and they're
Mhm.
real, and you're playing it out. Well, film is obviously a totally different medium, right? So it has to be out into the world. You
Yeah.
cannot have 10 minutes of chatter, right? And so, one of the first, and I knew that, and I try to be conscious of it from the beginning, is like, step back. What is the action of the play? What are the things that are, where's the movement? Where's the visual? Where is the storytelling that can be done with visuals and not words? Like, so one of the moments that I feel good about, because again, a lot of things are tiny moments in your life that, kind of stay with you. And it's a pretty simple sequence that was based on something that happened to me, where the mother is at the playground with her child, and the child is on a swing, atop of a swing set, of a play set, and there's a couple slides, and kids can kind of, go down the lot slides at the same time. And so this other kid comes up and says, "Hey, you want to race down the slide?" And they're similar ages, and the child with autism just ignores, the other child, and just kind of keep wandering off, and the other kid is just like, all right, whatever, and goes down by themselves. No other words besides that. It's just like doing a
Mhm.
race, and the kid doesn't say anything. And then, you watch Brianna, the female, the mother character, experience this, and just you see her watching. And it's one of those kind of moments where her reaction, and I have to say, I think that actor, I think she did such a good job to internalize what was happening.
Mhm.
Not big showy moments, not tears running down her face, but you could see in her face like, oh, that you can imagine what that
Mhm.
interaction would be. That would be a social moment. That would be fun for the child and whatever. And that's just this tiny little missed moment of like, oh, that's what the difference is with this. And a lot of it is more about the parent. And this was a big theme
Yeah.
that kind of runs through the film, and it comes into, comes up towards the end a lot, is like, to what extent is all of this work and all this, oh, I got to get him into the best thing. It's got to be the best school, really about the parent wanting to say, I've done this, I've delivered this thing. And obviously they really do want, and we really did want to give our child the best chance, right? But there are moments where you have like, is all this insanity that I'm trying to do really more about me feeling good that I've done everything I can, than about my child? And
Yeah.
that moment of a social missed opportunity, I think about that much more and more now. We all want our child to have friends, children to have friends. That
Mhm.
just seems like a no-brainer. Friends are good. Not having friends are bad. Well, if a friend, if in a social circumstance, causes tension and causes, angst to a child, well, that their definition of good, is different than our definition
Yeah.
of good. And so as I've gotten older, as my son's gotten older, I've just been much more conscious of that. We have a
Mhm.
party, we have a bunch of people that are in our house. He's generally okay with it, but it's not his favorite thing. Everybody wants to greet him. Everyone wants to show they care about Jimmy, and that's really cool. But I'm just like, for him, that might be a fist pump and let him go. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like, and so, as you're try to get better about all this stuff, you think about acceptance, right? Like, early days, in the time of that diagnosis, really it is, and this is really, it becomes an issue that is a lot talked about in the autism community. Your probably wife, would be aware of this. As people get older who are higher functioning with autism and can
Mhm.
speak for themselves or whatever, there becomes this real frustration, right? Because the fact is, when, especially at that early days, you are trying to change this person. You are trying to say, you have this thing, it is a problem, and we are trying to put you on a different path, right? And to be honest, I get that, and I still believe in that, right? And ABA therapy to help, if to give more tools, more communication tools, as long as it's done in a positive, loving, respectful way, where you're not driving a kid crazy and putting them in
Mhm.
a room for, sticking them, I believe like anything, it can be done poorly, it can be done well. But there is this thing of acceptance at the same time, and not trying to fundamentally change who a person is. And I know there's a real frustration, and that's something that, I'm very conscious of about this film in particular. People, will say, "Oh, I want to give your film to this person who has autism, who's, in their 20s and is struggling with that." And I say, I would love that, and I hope that
Mhm.
person has a good experience with my film. But that's not what my film is about. My film is about parents who are going through so much, about trying to understand how to handle this. A person with autism who's older, who's COVID, is in a totally different headspace,
Yeah.
and if anything, might not, connect to this thing that's really about what the parents are going through, and their parents might have gone something through something when they were 3 or 4 or 5 years old. And to be honest, that's not on their radar. That's not the most
Yeah.
important thing to a person with autism, right? They might care about it, they might resonate, it might not. But I always make a point to that, because um, like anything, any story, any topic, there is not one autism movie. There's not one autism
Yeah.
story. There's every person has their own story. And I'm always make a point to say this is a relationship story about these parents, and how they're handling this particular situation.
Yeah, and just a couple points with especially that scene with the playground. That's definitely a movie kind of scene that you can
Yeah.
play around with in a different format that might not translate in the same kind of way, or you might not have enough to be able to have so many settings on a stage unless you have
Oh
like
God, no. Yeah.
tons of
No, it
tons
wasn't
of
even on my
money
radar. Yeah.
to be able to do something like that. But
Yeah.
just being able to leverage scenes like that in this different medium,
Yeah.
and especially to some of your point too, I feel lucky working at a university that a lot of young adults who have autism wind up coming to the university I go to because there are resources for them.
Great.
And
Great.
I've worked with a lot
Oh,
of
can I ask
them.
what it is?
And well, it's one of those. So we're we're just a like a regular private 4-year university,
Yeah.
but
Okay. Yeah.
it's we have enough resources there. We have a whole department dedicated to support for like accommodations and stuff like that, where
That's awesome.
it feels like it's in a small enough school too where a lot of students with autism feel comfortable. We also
Yeah.
have degrees like our game design program winds up attracting a lot of young people
Yep.
with autism. And so I wind up working with a lot of students who do have autism, and it's about meeting where they're at. Like
Yeah.
I had a student who I had him in class. He always loved to blast metal music before class. And I told him as long as you keep it where I could actually talk to people before the start of class, and he turned it off at the start of class, I let him do his business.
Nice.
And like
Nice.
I'd see him around campus playing his
Yeah.
music out loud and he's doing his homework and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And it's like he's doing his thing. And,
It's just saying.
you know,
Yeah.
meeting where he's at.
Acceptance. Yeah.
Exactly. And, it's that perspective of like, it's not just people with autism that are different. Everybody's going to be different, and
Yup.
working in
Yup.
those kinds of situations of meeting people where they're at, and
Yep.
if they're not hurting anybody or causing any kind of distraction or harm, just like let them be. And
100%.
especially to your point too of like for the longest time, like Rain Man was like that movie. And that
Yep.
was like
100%.
the
Yeah.
definition of things. And it is
Yeah.
very interesting in 2025 being able to see a lot of films that have different representations of autism
Yeah.
or coming from different perspectives. And I guess for sake of our time, my last question for you, James, is I always like to ask at the end for a filmmaker, if you could give that one pitch, what's the one reason why people should go check out Love and Communication?
Um, yeah, I guess it's because I feel like it is a pretty unique point of view into um, a a situation that I don't think is explored that much, which
Hmm.
is parents who are going through something very intense, and it could be a lot of different types of intense things with a child, right? Who could have all kinds of different issues, and the kind of emotional, uh, uh, all of the things that bubble up from that, from the stress and the fact that you have the issue themselves, in this case, autism, that you are trying to handle the fact that your child has that, and what does that mean? But then you're trying to figure out, you're trying to advocate for them, you're trying to be like their
Yep.
lawyer and whatever, essentially, right? And all of the things that that does to a person, all of the pressure that that puts on that person, um, and how that affects them internally, right? And how that affects their relationship of their family. And so, to me, I think what it does is it creates a very unique dynamic where we are looking at, especially these two parents, as individuals, and how they're handling this kind of like boiling cauldron of
Hmm.
emotion in different ways. And I think, in particular, I think that that's unique, and a lot of people might not know that and be exposed to that. But then it's in a framework that I think people are very familiar with, which is, first of all, a couple different frameworks. First of all, the framework of technology, and the
Yeah.
fact that so much of how we interact with other people is online. And so that, that a part of how we handle things emotionally is this release into a computer, into a chat, into, sometimes with
Yeah.
strangers, right?
Hmm.
And how we do this without really thinking about it, and we have this kind of emotional, where people are looking for an emotional connection, and they're finding it in completely different ways, and some of them are healthy and some of them aren't healthy. And I think this film kind of dives into how these two people are going in these directions, and, to be honest, pretty unhealthy ways most of the
Yeah.
times, and not all, right? There are some things,
Hmm.
and what I think is also somewhat unique about my film is that there's no clear answers. There's no
Yep.
real right or wrong. There's definitely some things that are some bad decisions,
Yeah.
but there's no right or wrong person. There's no happy or sad ending. It is they're going forward. It is and like, I think a lot of times, you know, I think I wanted to make a film that is a snapshot of where people are in this period of time. I like to think that there is an arc, and there's some, there's a lot of actions that happen in the film, but there's also not this point of a buttoned up thing where it's like, okay,
Hmm.
this is, we know the path is clear, the path is not clear, right? And then none of our path is clear, right? With or
Yeah.
without autism, Um, so that's a long-winded answer, but I think that giving a snapshot into to a relationship and a couple in a situation that's fairly unique, and seeing how that plays out for them, in a fairly real, I think, heightened situations, but in a realistic framework, is what the film does, with, I think, some curveballs and some things that are
Yeah.
a little unexpected.
Well, and I appreciate your answer. And I think the film's a nice balance of putting you as an audience into a situation that you can learn a lot of
Yeah,
experiences that you may never have to go through, but people that you may know will. And then
yeah.
also, there are a lot of relatable and universal struggles in relationships and communication that the film does explore. But James, thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me. Where can people find Love and Communication?
Yeah, we have loveandcommunication.com. So it takes you to Apple TV, search it on Amazon, and Google Play are the three main ones. So if you go to our homepage, loveandcommunication.com, has links to all of those. We'd love for people to check it out.
Awesome. And I'll have that link down in the description of this video. But I really appreciate you taking your time today. And thank you so much for, one, allowing me to check out your film, and also for coming on and talking with me about it.
It's been super fun, Shane. I really appreciate it.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.